So first thing I'm opening up, let's go ahead and show you where I'm at. So if I go to my streaming folder, we're doing comic book rendering. In this comic book rendering folder, there's going to be a guide to ZBrush comic style rendering. That's what I'm using to kind of go through this, and it's a pretty long document, so we're probably not going to finish it all today. But we'll get started, and then in here you're going to have alphas, matcap images, material, OBDs, Photoshop templates, etc., etc. So as we go through here, we'll be pulling resources from here to start with, and eventually what I'd like to do, and we might do this in later streams too, or on the Pixelogic stream as well. If I go to streaming, ZBrush female high res, I don't have her latest file here downloaded, but let me go ahead and launch her up. I'll be posing and rendering this file. We've been kind of going back and forth on this lovely lady here for quite a while, so we got her pretty much finished out. We got the, if you saw my Facebook post, she's pretty much about as done as I'm going to take her tech suit, and then we're going to add the armor, and then we're going to put her in her mech suit, possibly, depending on how far we want to go with this. But she's pretty much done, so we'll do a little bit of comic style rendering with her. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and do delete all and start over again, and we're just going to start fresh here. So I'm going to go out of edit mode, control, clear my canvas. So we're going to be hopping back between ZBrush and Photoshop a little bit, but mostly we're going to be staying in ZBrush, going over some basic file structure and material settings, so we can kind of learn a little bit more about light cap, matte cap, all while we're going through this resources. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we have the PDF open over here, and here's his preamble, basically the resources folder we already talked about, and the intro here and illustration and kind of getting these comic style renders and consistency. He also has a lot of links to like Jim Lee and McFarlane and the Hellboy comics that have these really, really classic comic styles, and we'll be able to do that in real time in ZBrush as we get a little bit further along. But first we have to learn how to manipulate our materials within ZBrush. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and load up one of his resources here. So let's go ahead and go to my streaming, comic rendering, resources, and we're going to go to Z Tools, and we'll grab that Kepler bust here. So with this, I'm going to drag that out on my canvas, go into edit mode, hit F to frame, and I am working a little bit smaller than I usually do in ZBrush, obviously. I'm going to probably have both of these open, but you can still see what's going on in the middle here, so I'm not overly concerned. But if we ever need a little bit more room, I can always pop these things out, and we can kind of study what's going on in here. But we'll go ahead and leave these open for now and talk about some of this. Here we go, talk about perspective and camera angle, which we'll get to in a little bit. Basically, if you have perspective, that's the P key, on and off. So when you're doing comic book rendering, you probably don't want an orthographic view because you're going to have like a small head and a big body because there is no focal length here. So if I turn perspective on or hit P, that's where you get the really dynamic angles. And if you really want to overcrank that, grab your draw menu. And any of these menus here, if you're not aware, you can dock. You can click these little dividers to open and close these docking stations. And if I go over here to the draw menu, I can drag this over. And perspective is in here as well as this angle of view. By default it's at 50. I'll probably leave it there, but if you really want to undercrank that, 5 will put it more than orthographic, and if you really overcrank that, that'll give you that. Remember those 90s drawings they used to do, those extreme little weirdo trapper keeper kind of paintings they used to do where everything was like really an extreme angle? You can kind of do that as well. Play with the drama of your scene. You can crank up that angle of view there. So I'm going to put that back to 50 here. Harsh shadows and contrast. And I'll let you read this. Again, if you're just joining us now, it's zbrushguides.com/tutorials. Okay, here's Kepler, and this is his Kepler character there, which we just loaded up. And what we're going to be doing, the techniques, we're going to be using light cap, matte cap, Photoshop matte cap, and then mixing shaders with matte cap. So basically, light cap is a way to create your own matte cap, and the matte cap, if you didn't know, is right here. And if you also want to learn a little bit more, if you're new to ZBrush, you can actually go to Intro to ZBrush Part 1. That'll walk you through the basics of ZBrush. And then if you want to continue on, Intro to ZBrush Part 2 and Part 3 is pretty good. And if you want to go back through previous episodes that we've done on my live stream, you can go to the live stream full episodes or the live stream highlights. Anyway, we've got our guy right here, so let's talk a little bit about materials. So here's our matte cap materials, and here's our standard materials. The basic difference is if I close this draw menu out and we grab our material menu and drag that over, you're going to see with a matte cap material selected, and that's these ones up here. Let's go ahead and choose an obvious one like droplet. What's basically causing this thing to render this look in real time is this texture right here. If we open up this modifiers here and scroll down, you're going to see there's a little droplet file in there. If we choose another matte cap, like matte cap red wax, you're going to see there is two spheres in there, and that is basically A and B transitioning between each other. I know this is getting a little bit ahead, but I just want to have you realize the difference between this type of shader, which is the look is being driven by just basically an image, which is pretty powerful and pretty cool as we get there to kind of modifying those two, as opposed to something like the basic material, where those ones, you'll notice, these are matte cap, these are standard. So your basic material's under the standard material. And this one has a bunch of different settings that you can kind of play with in here as far as diffuse and specular curves and all that stuff. And you're going to see you can put a texture in here, but it behaves a little bit differently than the matte caps. Lighting affects matte caps a little bit differently than basic materials. So if you go over here to the light menu, and we dock that over here, this light menu, we can move, see how we can move that light around, and it affects the material. And in fact, you can turn on multiple lights if you want to, and multiple lights will affect this material as well. However, if you go do a matte cap, and we'll go back to that matte cap gray here, you're going to see as I move this light around, it doesn't affect the material at all. The only thing this light will do is tell the shadow which direction to go into. So if we go to our BPR render here, and that's a best preview render, you're going to see with my light over here, the shadow is casting in the right direction, but it's not affecting how my material or my object is being drawn, because all that lighting information is baked into this material on this texture right here. So hope that makes sense. It'll make more sense as we move forward and we start digging into light cap materials and the material properties for the matte caps. Oh yeah, and the BPR render, just while we're demoing, I'm going to take this S-Pix down to 1. That's the anti-aliasing render quality. If you are doing this for real, then I would leave it at 3 or even higher if you want to. Actually, we'll turn it down to 0 because it's just going to render a little bit faster. And it looks fine in a demo purpose, especially since I'm outputting this at 1280 by 720, so who cares? But so here's the cool thing. So the Zbrush matte cap right here, you have that available to you. The Photoshop matte cap, you can basically go into Photoshop and create your own little texture swatch, and that will create lighting within Zbrush, so that's going to be really cool. And then of course you can mix these using the S1, S2, S3, and S4. We'll get there in a bit. And there is Photoshop functionality within Zbrush when we get to the, if we go here to the render menu, you're going to see there is Bpr filters, and all of these, like here's noise filter and stuff. So when we hit Bpr and then we go into the render settings, we'll be able to change these. If we turn this on, you see you can filter noise, you can do posterization, you can do colorize, hue, saturation, intensity, levels adjustments, that kind of thing can all be found within these Bpr filters. So, and it's all real time as well. So, you know, with this filter, you can update those on the fly. So we'll go back in here and we'll turn that off. But we're not going to get there for a while. Just wanted to let you guys know that there is actual even Photoshop capability within Zbrush in real time if you wanted to kind of use that previs in Zbrush before you head over to Photoshop. And we're going to start out technical, like he says here, but it's good to kind of just see these things working in a technical application so you can tell with simple objects how the matte caps are working.